Hello everyone, my name is Karen Tutt. I'm a General Manager for Catholic Care Sydney and I will be your moderator today. Welcome to Ageing Well, our fourth masterclass. The topic of the webinar today is financial planning as we get older and what to prepare for financially and legally. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Aboriginal peoples of the nations on the lands that we are all meeting from all across Sydney. I'm coming to you today from the Wallandilly Shire and would like to recognise the traditional custodians of the land, the Dharawal and Gundungurra peoples. We acknowledge all elders past, present and emerging and thank them for their stewardship. Today we have two guest speakers, Tran and Sharon Bullen. Our first presenter is Tran. Tina is one of the financial advisors with Australian Catholic Super Financial Advice Team based in Burwood. She has been providing financial advice for 23 years with Australian Catholic Super for the last 7 years. Her passion is helping people take control of their finances to create a comfortable retirement. She believes that a financially secure retirement does not happen by chance, it happens by design, so start planning early. Fun fact about Tina loves the outdoors, has travelled Australia and abroad for scuba diving, snowboarding and competing in dragon boat racing. Since last year, she has taken up standing paddleboarding and skateboarding. Our second presenter is Sharon Bullen. Sharon is a branch manager for the New South Wales Trustee and Guardian Sydney team, which is the busiest branch location for the agency. Sharon and her team work with customers to prepare important planning ahead documents, including wills, power of attorney and enduring guardianship, and provide advice on estate planning and succession matters. Sharon is deadly serious about her work and she is looking forward to her own retirement, to be out fishing with the family. And she hopes to reel you in and have you hooked so you can start thinking about planning ahead. Before we delve into our presentations, I have some housekeeping to discuss. We welcome your questions, and as this is a webinar and everyone's microphones are automatically switched off, please write questions in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screens. We have a lot of information to get through in today's webinar, so we will ask our speakers to answer your questions in written form, and we will provide the responses as part of the post-webinar resources if we don't get to answer questions live this morning. So without further hesitation, I'll hand over to Tina. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Karen. Firstly, let me thank everyone for joining us today, and it's a pleasure to be here to share this information with you. I'm speaking from my home office in the City of Sydney. I also would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders, both past and present. We'll start off with a disclaimer. Unfortunately, it's something we have to do. And this is to let you know that the presentation is general in nature, and it does not constitute legal, tax or financial advice. It doesn't take into account your personal situation or needs, and should you require personal advice, please consult with a licensed financial planner. So that's out of the way. Let's get started to the presentation. So what I'll cover today is quite a lot of things, and it won't be in as much details as I would like to share with you, but hopefully this will get you started to delve a little bit further into how each of these might be applicable to you. Now, the first 3 points with regards to managing your money is probably the most critical, and it applies to everybody. Cash flow management, budgeting and emergency fund. Get a handle on this and you're a step ahead. Managing debt is also critical if you are paying off loans, and it may be less relevant to you in retirement, and hopefully you've managed that well to get there. Insurance is risk management, and I'm referring to personal risk. Having protection from loss of your earning capacity due to illness or accident. This is critical to ensuring that you have peace of mind. Superannuation and investing is about making your savings work harder. The harder it works, the less you have to work. Funding aged care. This can be a stressful time as you have to deal with aging and frailty, and it may be your power of attorney doing the legwork. trying to sort this out in terms of whether to sell the home, investments, withdrawing superannuation to meet the upfront and ongoing costs. There are tax implications, Centrelink, cash flow, estate planning consideration. We do offer an aged care advice service and seek advice as it can be complicated. Lastly, estate planning. This is what Sharon's going to be covering with you, and it is important. It's often unpleasant. We don't want to think about it, but again, sorting these things out will give you peace of mind. So let's start with the foundations, which I think the first three being the most imperative for everyone. Cash flow is the lifeblood of your financial success. The younger you are, your ability to earn an income is your biggest asset. If you think about how much you would earn over your working life, say $70,000 per annum, 40 years of working, that's $2.8 million. And your income needs to be split between meeting your needs today as well as meeting your needs for the future. So having a plan to allocate your money appropriately between today and the future is important. How's this different when you're retired? Well, when you're retired, you're living off your savings, so you don't necessarily have to save. So the focus here is managing your spending. And this is where the budgeting comes in, and this applies to everyone. Now, budgeting is something that a lot of people struggle with. They can figure out how much their bills are, but it's the discretionary spending which gets away from us. So if you're working, don't make savings what's left in your bank account. If you're like me, if it's in my bank account, I'll find a reason to spend it. Especially with online shopping these days, it's really easy. So having a budget ensures that you have worked out what your bills are, your required day-to-day things. That's important. And as a rule of thumb, what we want to try and do is try to save 20 to 30% of our income. And if there's still money left over, well, then that's the discretionary spending you have available. What you do with these savings depends on what you want to achieve. And I call this paying yourself first. That means you should prioritize putting money away for when you will stop working for money. For retirees, having a budget allows you to set up your cash flow because you are paying yourself now. And it allows you to manage how much you draw out of your pension if you're receiving income from an allocated pension or receiving income from your investments to identify if that income is sufficient. It ensures that managing your spending within your capacity as well, because you don't want to risk running out of money too soon. And this is a big concern for a lot of retirees. And we can help with some financial modelling to give you a sense of how you're tracking. The next foundation is having an emergency fund. What a lot of people think, well, I don't know what my needs might be in the future, but we know that unexpected emergencies can arise, and unexpected emergencies are not unexpected because it will happen. We just don't know when and how much and what it would be. Things like car breaks down, some white goods break down, and what happens is these things seem to happen all together all at once. And what we want to do is have a cash buffer so that we can be able to cover these expenses. It's not ideal to use a credit card, and ideally, if you do use it, you're able to clear it and pay it off before the interest starts incurring. For a retiree, having an emergency fund is having money easily accessible at call in a bank account. It will not be earning much interest, so you need to have sufficient amount to give you peace of mind, but not too much, because then that money could be working harder for you invested. So it's that balance between having an emergency money and covering what you might need, but also ensuring that it's not too lazy. Next foundation is debt management. Now, hopefully in retirement, you're not having to deal with this, and you've been managing your debt to the level where you've been able to retire. But if you're still working, most people may come up with a HECS debt, maybe some credit card debt and mortgages. for your home purchase or an investment property loan. What you need to understand is having a strategy to pay down debt is important, and that requires you to work out and structure which debt to prioritize. There is a difference in terms of when we look at debt, what is good and what is bad. Ideally, good debt is a purchase in an asset that's appreciating in value. So for example, the purchase of your home. Bad debt, on the other hand, is purchasing an asset that's depreciating in value, or it's a lifestyle. So what you've spent on that will cost substantially more the longer it takes you to pay it down. And your hard-earned money ends up paying the interest expense, which goes to the bank and less in your pocket. So by the time you retire, hopefully you've managed this well and you're no longer having to deal with debt. But watch out for the credit card spending. So what I find sometimes is people may forget to pay it off within the month and they've gone past the interest-free period. And it may seem small, $10 a month for a $1,500 balance, but that's $10 of interest that you're not making. Personal insurance is an important consideration when you have children who depend on you, a mortgage to service, and it relies on your capacity to earn a living to meet all of these things. So insurance is something that most of us may not think about, but it is probably your largest asset if you're still young and you've got a long working life. Income protection insurance is one of those policies that help you to provide peace of mind that if something goes wrong and you lose your capacity to make a living, that there is an ongoing income to replace your wage. Other policies for personal protection include lump sum policies like life insurance, total permanent disability lump sum, trauma or critical illness. These provide a lump sum for a specified event. Now in retirement, you're not going to be needing insurance. They're less relevant to you. You have assets already and you can what I call self-insure. The next part we cover here is about superannuation and investing. Now, for most people, superannuation will be possibly their largest asset or the second largest asset to their home. Now, I won't go through all the rules around superannuation as today we don't have the time to go through it. But what I want to explain and get people to understand is that superannuation is an effective vehicle structure, you want to call it that, to grow your retirement savings because the tax concessions that are provided. It's a low tax environment for you to be growing your retirement savings. Now, if you're working, you're paying income tax at your marginal tax rate. In superannuation, you're not paying that at your marginal tax rate. It's a lower tax environment, which means you get to keep more of your money. But there's a catch, of course. Superannuation has a lot of rules and regulations around when you can access that money. And it has been designed predominantly to provide you with a vehicle to provide a retirement nest egg. So it is for long-term savings. And generally, it can be accessed when you're retired. In saying that, there are other purposes for superannuation, which I'll go through. So you can see here that superannuation, while it's predominantly for retirement purposes, there are other avenues in which it can assist you with funding your life insurance. For a lot of people, if they're working and they've got an industry fund set up, it may include default level of insurances. It's not necessarily tailored to your personal situation. So it's important that you assess and get advice on the appropriateness of the level of cover. For a lot of young people, they may be underinsured. For retirees, for older people, they might be overinsured. But superannuation can be available to fund your insurances. And that way, you're not having to divert cash flow for that particularly if the cost is onerous at the beginning. In some cases, superannuation could also be used to grow your retirement savings or give you more cash flow to accelerate loan repayment. This is when you get to pre-retirement, called transition to retirement. And for a lot of people younger, they may not think of superannuation as an asset, a vehicle that they could use to build their deposit for their first home. But their first home saver scheme was aimed at assisting young people to purchase their first home by enabling them to save for that deposit in superannuation, again, in a low tax environment. Now you can have the voluntary payments that you've put in each year drawn back out for a home purchase. And the benefit, as I said, is that it's being taxed at a lower tax rate. Now, if you don't happen to need to use it, well, it's there in your superannuation for your retirement. For post-retirees, superannuation could be an investment vehicle if you were to downsize and have surplus funds left over from that downsizing. Again, it's going to give you the low tax-free structure. There is limits applied on those amounts, and it's important to seek advice. Now, we talked about superannuation as a structure. A lot of people see that as an investment, and it is too. Remember that the structure determines the tax implication, but where that money is invested is what's driving the returns that you will get out of your superannuation. And that's where it's important for you to engage in that decision on how your superannuation is invested. For people who have not made an investment choice, most superannuation funds will have a default option that you'll be placed in. And that default option is not tailored to your personal situation. It's what the trustees have determined as the most suitable for everyone. And it may not be suitable to you. So it's important to get personalized advice or make a personal decision around the investment choice that aligns with your risk profile and your time horizon. Now, investing is not trying to pick tomorrow's best winners. It's not a form of gambling. What we're making with regards to investment decision should not be driven by emotion, not based on fear of missing out or fear of loss. Okay. When we think about investing, it's understanding the risk and return optimization. You can't have one without the other, unfortunately. And in terms of the types of assets, growth assets will tend to be more higher return, but higher risk. Defensive assets will have lower return and lower risk. In terms of how we manage that, it's ensuring that we're appropriately investing for the time horizon and sticking with the strategy over the long term, and diversification. Let's just use the recent downturn in the Australian share market as an example. Before the pandemic, 19th of February, up to 1 month later, on the 23rd of March, the Australian market fell 36%. That is the ASX 200 index went from 7,166 to 4,546. Since then, it has gotten all the way back and is 3% higher. So as of yesterday, the index was 7,384. Now, if you panicked in March and sold out, you would have lost that 36% drop and not recover it in the same way if it was sitting in cash. So having a long-term view and sticking with your investment strategy and not making an emotional response will ensure that you will get a better long-term outcome. Managing risk could also be achieved through diversification. So when we're talking about diversification, it means not putting all your investments in the one asset class. You see this pie chart, we've got some of the asset class that are typically available for you to be invested in your superannuation, or if you don't have the superannuation, if you don't have ability to contribute to superannuation because you're already retired, you can have access to these type of investments in a managed fund. You don't have to be an expert in them, but what you do need to know is understand the investment decision you're making. With investments in terms of diversification, we want to have access to Australian investments, overseas investments, growth, defensive. By diversifying in this way, we're reducing risk in the long term because we're not putting all of our returns on the one asset class. This is a really good example to illustrate the benefit of long-term investing and also the difference between cash and shares investment. You see the chart here. The purple line shows $10,000 invested in the year 2000, and over that time made a slow and steady return. In 20 years, it has grown to $23,040. The blue line is that same $10,000 invested in shares. This is illustrated based on the share index, so it's not a particular stock. There's lots of bumps along the way. As you can see in that period there, it's dipped below. So it's actually made a loss below what you would have had if you had it in cash. But having said that, sticking with that investment over this period of time, we see a very strong rate of growth, and then it dips again. What we can learn from this is there's going to be bumps along the way, but if you stick with it over the long term, you are going to get a better return. And that, over the 20-year period in this case, there is actually quite a significant difference between the result of cash and shares. In this case, those shares with the 10,000 initially will now be worth 58,632. The next foundation is estate planning, which I won't go through into a lot of detail, as Sharon will be sharing that most of that with you. But what I want to talk about more so is superannuation. Superannuation is not, a lot of people are not aware that it can be paid outside of your will by way of making a beneficiary nomination. And when it comes to making a beneficiary nomination, you can make it binding or non-binding. The binding nomination gives you certainty and efficiency. What's required to make a beneficiary nomination binding is usually two adult witnesses to witness your nomination. For most funds, it may be that it lapses after 3 years, so you have to redeclare it every 3 years to maintain a binding nomination. This ensures that if your circumstances change, that you're reviewing that and making sure that it's up to date, because it will be paid to your beneficiary if it's a binding nomination and there's no ability to challenge that. So if your circumstances have changed and you haven't changed your nomination, it may end up in someone else's hands that you did not intend. The other parts with regards to estate planning is there are certain tax implications. Now, the good news is in Australia in general, we don't have an inheritance tax. So tax doesn't get triggered with an inheritance when assets are passed on through the estate. For example, the family home or an investment property or shares. But there is death benefit tax applicable to superannuation benefits when it's paid out. And it depends on who the recipients are. In superannuation legislation, there is an identification of the recipient as either a dependent or a non-dependent. Now, for most people, if you're married, your spouse or your legal partner is considered a dependent under superannuation. And when they receive your superannuation, it is tax-free as a dependent. Who are non-dependents for superannuation will typically be your adult children. If they receive your superannuation, then there is a tax on the superannuation of 15% plus 2% Medicare levy on the taxable component. Okay. Now, usually your superannuation will have a tax-free component and a taxable component. but most of it will be a taxable component. The tax-free component is made up of your personal after-tax contribution, and this is recorded in the superannuation records. There are some strategies that we can help clients with to increase the tax-free component of your superannuation. So seek advice if the estate tax management of your superannuation is an important criteria for you. And lastly, funding aged care. I mentioned before that there is some complexity around that, and most of the time it might be your power of attorney that's doing the legwork, and they may not fully understand all the ramification with regards to Centrelink taxation, cash flow management, consideration around sale of assets. We're able to provide that sort of help, and we're also got some financial tools that can give us perspective on the different options and how that might impact the decision, so that they can make an informed decision to assist you in looking at how you fund your aged care costs initially and the ongoing costs. So that pretty much brings up the conclusion in terms of all the topics that I've covered today. The success of your financial management is going to be important if you want to achieve your goals, to have some goals and identify them and articulate them. Planning your financial future is going to give you a better chance of succeeding it than leaving it to chance. Set some goals, work out your budget, start a savings plan if you are working, or in retirement. Make sure that whatever you're spending is within your means and that you're not going to risk running out of money. Protect yourself, your assets and your family if they're relying on your capacity to earn a living. Understand your superannuation and investment decisions. The harder your money works, the less you have to work. Consider your estate planning. Passing on your assets to the right people and also minimizing the loss of tax will ensure that you get to keep more for your family. If you would like further advice or personalized advice, we do have an advice service that we can help you with. We provide both holistic and limited advice. Holistic pretty much covers all the things that I've mentioned today if they're relevant to you. Limited advice would be chunks in specific topics. We also provide an aged care advice service as well. And a lot of people may not be aware of where to go because it needs to pull a lot of information from different places. And that also includes some financial products that may be relevant with regards to funding aged care and the implications on Centrelink. That's my contact, or that's the fund's contact details and our website and member contact number. This is my personal information. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can contact the fund or myself personally. And that concludes my meeting. So my presentation. So thank you, and I will pass it over to Sharon.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you very much, Tina. Hopefully it's coming through all right. Again, my name's Sharon Bullen, and I'd like to thank the Ageing World team for inviting New South Wales Trustee and Guardian to speak today at the 4th class masterclass on financial planning and beyond.
You're very clear, Sharon. All good.
Okay, just trying to get this slide started. So let's see if I can get through this. Okay, let's get started. The next slide here. Does that come through?
You're still on your original slide, Sharon.
Okay, I'll just try and get that started. Sorry, everyone. I'll just work again towards that. And slide. My slide won't get moved to number 2 by some. Let's just try again. 1, 2, 3. Let's try again. share. Now, does that work, everyone?
That's showing your original slide. Do you want to see if it will move on?
Let's just hope it does. Well, let's hope it does. I'll just try again. Slide. I'll stop sharing again and do this again. I think I'm having technical difficulties for some reason. It's not sliding. Let's try.
Have you clicked Start Presentation, Sharon?
Slideshow. Start from current slide. Just as we did before. Maybe if you can go at that end. Slideshow, resume. How's that? Maybe if we can have your end, if that's all right.
Yep, that's fine. Luke, would you mind jumping in and sharing for us?
Thank you, Luke. My apologies, everyone. I'm here to
No worries. It's always tough, Sharon.
Planning ahead, while we have planning ahead documents in place, and how we can be sure that our loved ones are looked after if circumstances change for our life. I mean, we plan ahead to make sure we know who looks after our family if something happens to us, and who takes care of our finances if we're unable to. Who will speak for us if we cannot speak for ourselves? Now, I'm not sure, is that slide coming through? Have you started that? Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. I've got the slideshow on. Thank you. I'll just move that up and we'll just work from here. My apologies once again, everyone. Okay, so we're here for life's most critical moments, and what do we mean by that is that say we're getting married, we're welcoming our first grandchild or child into our world, buying mentioned a house and extending, perhaps going on vacation or starting our business or planning for retirement. They are the reasons we start planning ahead and we start thinking about the steps to planning ahead. So if we go to the next slide, I can tell you that our research tells us that people do want to plan ahead, but they often are unsure what's involved and how to start the process. The good news is that planning ahead is easier than you think. All you need to do is follow 3 steps. Make a power of attorney, appoint an enduring guardian, and prepare a will. Now, New South Wales Trustee Guardian conducted some research. This research provided statistics that show that 66% of people in New South Wales do not have a power of attorney, and 69% do not have an enduring guardian, and 49% do not have a will. Now, it did show there was a high uptake of wills in the age group between 50 and 64-year-olds. However, in that statistics, there was also 27% of those who said that their will did not reflect their current circumstances, and that 18% didn't have a will at all. Just go to the next slide. Now, let's assume you're considering getting these documents in place and you haven't been able to yet. So when do you actually start planning? You can only start planning while you have capacity. Capacity is when you consider your circumstances, including the decision at hand. When you can weigh up your options, assess risk and benefits. When you're able to communicate your own views and seek help if you need it. When you're unable or when you're being unduly influenced, that's when we might assess capacity. But, you know, I mean, people do ask often, who determines who has capacity? Well, a legal practitioner or a prescribed witness who's witnessing your planning ahead documents will determine if you have capacity. If there are any concerns around this, they may require medical assessment to determine your capacity. If you do not have that capacity, the process you go through is through the court or tribunal. Now, appointing someone to make those decisions for you can be time-consuming and stressful for the family. And it can take 6 to 12 months before even to get through that tribunal process. and in the meantime, the personal funds cannot be accessed at the time. Just go through to the next slide. First step is to make a power of attorney. Actually, before I go through to making a power of attorney, I just want to cover just a brief case study talking about capacity. I want to talk to you about a gentleman by the name of Andrew. A few years ago, Andrew's mother had started to get forgetful, and she started leaving things in odd places. And Andrew realised there was something wrong because it wasn't her usual behaviour. Before she came ill, he discussed her long-term financial and medical needs for the future. He spoke to the family solicitor, who suggested that they have the 3 documents in place: the will, the power of attorney, and the enduring guardian. It was important to know for them what's going to happen if something was to happen to his mother. And rather than having outside people make these decisions for them, she was able to appoint Andrew, who was, when she had capacity, as her guardian and attorney. After his mother became incapacitated and wasn't able to make her own medical decisions, it was really easy for Andrew to speak to her doctors and manage that health and wellbeing decisions. They were happy that these conversations were taking place before she lost capacity. Now, Andrew can now concentrate on her daily needs without thinking about whether all the decisions he was making was correct or not correct, because he knew, having hit all in black and white, he knew he was right. Andrew quoted, and I'll repeat again, Andrew said, "Take the courage to have that conversation before it can happen to anyone at any time." It saved him a lot of heartache and upset and emotional stress. That was Andrew's story, and actually it's on YouTube if you want to follow the whole story. But we plan ahead, firstly starting with our power of attorney, and I'd regard that as a companion to your will. Now, a will ensures you have assets that are distributed according to your wishes after death. A power of attorney lets you appoint someone who manages your financial affairs on your behalf while you're alive. A power of attorney is an important document for life planning, as is a will. Now, what are the benefits of taking a power of attorney? Well, there's 4 main ones. There's times when you may want to entrust the management of your legal and financial affairs, say for instance you're travelling, or you may have the misfortune of having an accident such as Alzheimer's or dementia or a disability, or you may require extended stay in hospital. And if you don't want to be burdened with your day-to-day management of your financial affairs, you can rely on your power of attorney. On the next slide, you'll see that in New South Wales, a power of attorney can only apply to financial and legal matters. For instance, should you be travelling and you're ill, you can authorise your attorney to pay your bills, manage your investments, operate your bank accounts. Doesn't mean you lose control over your affairs. You can still manage your finances as you like. And you can cancel the power of attorney or limit that scope as long as you have that mental capacity to make those decisions. You can appoint a trusted family member or a friend as your power of attorney, or a trustee company such as the New South Wales Trustee Guardian, as long as they agree to take on the role. And most importantly, someone whom you have absolute trust in. However, whoever you choose to appoint, do make sure that your attorney has the business and financial skills to manage your affairs properly and are capable of keeping accurate records and dealings undertaken on your behalf. There are times when you think you know someone well, and I think we all have been in that situation. However, they find the role may be too daunting, feel overwhelmed by their expectations. So talk it out with whomever you have in mind and get that peace of mind. Now, since it operates only when you're alive, a power of attorney does not affect your will. There are 2 kinds of power of attorneys. One is a general power of attorney that ceases to have effect if a person loses mental capacity. And secondly, there's an enduring power of attorney that continues to be enforced after you've lost capacity to manage your financial and legal affairs due to dementia and so on. The next slide, if you do not want to burden anyone, you can always trust, or you don't wish to burden your family, you can trust the New South Wales Trustee and Guardian. They have a good track record. They're established. We've managed we have specialist staff within the team, and we also are located in many locations throughout New South Wales. I'll just go through the next slide. Next slide is, sorry, I'm just going to try and catch up with, okay. Now, this brings us to the second step, an enduring guardian. Appointing an enduring guardian, you choose a guardian while you still have capacity. An enduring guardian can make those health and lifestyle decisions for you if you lose the capacity to make your own at some time in the future. It's important to have both the enduring guardian and the power of attorney. An attorney cannot make the decisions about where you live or what treatment you should receive or what services you should receive. Your enduring guardian can make those decisions. The appointment of an enduring guardian takes effect only if you lose the capacity to make your own health and lifestyle decisions. So an enduring guardian makes those decisions about accommodation, healthcare, medical and dental consent, and services such as Meals on Wheels. When deciding who to appoint as your enduring guardian, you should consider who best understands your values and wishes, and who would have the skills to make those decisions for you. If we move on, the person you appoint while you have capacity must be over 18, have the capacity, you can appoint more than one, and avoids conflicts and legal issues. And remembering it only takes effect after you lose capacity. And like your power of attorney, you can revoke it at any time and make changes as long as you have capacity. And I always believe too that you need to discuss your wishes, write them down, give them the directions to the person you're appointing, make sure they know what you would like to happen if something should happen to your mental capacity and unable to make these lifestyle decisions. Brings us to our third step, which is preparing a will. Now, a will is a legal document that sets out who you want to receive your assets, including jewellery and sentimental items, money and property when you die. It's important to realise that specific legal requirements need to be followed to make a will valid. It's definitely preferable to have a will in place so assets and sentimental items can be distributed according to your wishes. And if you have children under 18 or other people who depend on you financially, it's important to make those arrangements for their well-being should you pass away. If you die without a will, you die without a say. That's if you don't have a will, no one knows who you wanted to have as your beneficiaries and who you wanted to have as your executor, and that's the person who or organisation you nominate to administer your estate upon your death. If you die without a will, you die intestate, meaning your estate will be divided according to a set formula and distributed a certain way. If you die without the will, family members that you would like to inherit may not be the ones who'll get the entitlement. There's a manner of distribution set out by the intestacy laws that may not be what you wanted. For example, the laws do not provide for gifts for charities or arrangements you might want to make for cultural or religious reasons. There's also no allowance for pets in this set standard formula. So if you have any pets, you probably would like to ensure that they're cared for if something happens to them. And if you are in a de facto or same-sex relationship, it's also necessary to supply sworn evidence that the relationship existed. There needs to be proof of a relationship, and this can result in expense, distress when loved ones are grieving. It's so much easier to have a will drafted and name your partner as beneficiary. I can tell you a short case story, and it's a fact that I was involved with a few years ago. A lady who resided in Paddington in an old terrace home. She isolated herself, and a recluse, also known for her many cats. She was often seen sitting at her front doorstep, watching people, and all on her own. One day, the neighbours noticed they hadn't seen, I'll call her Irene, for some time, so they called the police in. Police found her unwell. The ambulance came and had to lift her from the top floor of her bedroom over the balcony. As this person gathered clutter, she was a hoarder and lived in disrepair. So they took her to hospital, and unfortunately she passed away. New South Wales Trustee and Guardian were called in to assist. We couldn't find a will. We did some searches through the house, which was very difficult. We connected with the locals in the area who knew her well, the neighbours, the community help, the social worker there also was a person of interest with us, as well as the RSPCA, funny enough, who would visit Irene and leave food for the cats, or would leave the food behind in the laneway and the back door for the cats. So she was known to the community and was getting some assistance, but very private and wouldn't let anyone in the house. So the Trustee and Guardian secured a property and started making investigations into her affairs. There was no will to be located, so we submitted under the Succession Act, under the laws of intestacy. We identified and located her only living relative, a brother, who actually only lived in a suburb away. As we started to finalise legally his inheritance, someone showed up. Apparently it was her boyfriend. Now, this lady was in her early 80s, and again, as I mentioned, when we went into her home, it was a hoarder's home. It wasn't very pleasant, but she was removed from the front balcony because no one could get the stretcher in to take her to hospital and attend to her health. So this gentleman showed up and proceeded to take us to court. He tried his hardest. Apparently he was a fellow who had delivered groceries in that area and knew of this woman. So the New South Wales Trustee and Guardian defended the case, as in protected Irene and her assets. We ultimately, after a long and complex battle, the New South Wales Trustee and Guardian ultimately won the case. And Irene's brother rightfully inherited the estate, which of course included the terrace home in Paddington. So that was a good result, however costly, and could have been avoided if Irene had a will. And the community, thank you for the community who also assisted with all our investigation. It was great. I'll just move on. Again, the do-it-yourself will. I mean, if I had an audience, I'd be asking everyone who out there has done their own or drafted their own will. Well, we don't advise that. There's definitely risk there in drafting a will. Quite often there's ambiguous wording and extremely common in homemade wills, and it may result in substantial cost and delay and time in administrating your estate. It's definitely not advisable. A will must conform to strict legal requirements. Otherwise, the courts may decide it's not valid. If that's the case, your assets will be distributed according to a predetermined formula, and it's not as you intended. So please, my advice, definitely get a will professionally drafted. Let's have a look. We'll go to the next slide. When should you prepare your will and when should you update your will? Well, you should review your will at least on an average every 5 years, or when circumstances change, such as getting married, divorced, or living in a de facto relationship, or buying or selling. Also consider when it's time to change your executor. Maybe your executor has become ill or can't handle that responsibility as defined in the will, or has passed away, or perhaps one of your beneficiaries has passed away. It's time to look at updating your will. But also, before you start to make up your will, it's also a good idea to make sure you have a list of your assets, the people you want to leave them to. Give some thought to the age, say the children or grandchildren should receive their share. And how much do you want, how are you going to divide the assets? And of course, choose a competent and responsible executor. Choosing an executor, they're the person who carries out the wishes after you die. There's a big responsibility for an executor, which is firstly locating your will, applying to the Supreme Court for a grant of probate. Now, probate is a formal document that confirms your executor and gives permission to administer the estate. The executor determines the beneficiaries, collects the assets, pays debts and claims, and assess them and prepays them if they're substantiated, of course. And they distribute their estate assets according to the terms of the will. And they also manage long-term trusts. An executor also needs to lodge tax even before and after death. Clearly, being an executor is a huge responsibility, and many people, when we're nominating them, are unsure what to expect. It's a massive scale of responsibility. They may not be willing or able to undertake these duties, responsibilities, and liabilities the role entails. That's why you don't leave room for surprises, you talk it out. An executor should be a good communicator and should have time to dedicate to the task. They should have financial and management skills and be able to prioritise. They may not be willing or able to undertake these duties, responsibilities and liabilities. So always choose wisely, and always you can pick a trustee organisation to act in their place. And quite often, the executors unfortunately do step down far too often. So it's best to have that conversation. Being an executor can be complex and time consuming, and the entire process of drawing will can be hugely daunting. Managing finances and legalities as a power of attorney is no easy feat. That's why it's wise to consider a professional and an independent executor and attorney, such as the New South Wales Trustee and Guardian, or a solicitor, to take charge to ensure your family is taken care of, when you can't. This minimises the workload and burden on your family and friends at such a difficult time. The New South Wales Trustee and Guardian has exceptionally trained staff to help you, no matter how straightforward or complicated your estates or your assets are. We're able to assist you at any time. Come in and have a chat with us. When you're unsure, make sure, 1, you make a power of attorney. 2, you appoint an enduring guardian. And 3, you prepare a will. Now, as the state's largest will maker, over 100 years of experience, administered 240,000 estates, prepared over 1 million wills, and we also have 500,000 who use our Will Safe product. Now, for many, will storage means keeping your will at home, where it may be lost, damaged or stolen. If a will can't be located when required, it could cost the estate thousands of dollars. There's also a serious risk of your assets not being distributed as you intended. When you store your will, power of attorney or enduring guardian documents with the New South Wales Trustee and Guardian Will Safe, it can be easily uplifted when needed, and electronic copies are held for added security. I'll just go to the final slide. We're independent and impartial. The New South Wales Trustee and Guardian, as I said, has 100 years of experience. We're offering a complete service. We have exceptionally capable and professional staff. We're easily accessible through locations through New South Wales and the registrars of all local courts. We've also partnered with Service New South Wales, who holds brochures on our behalf on our services. If you want to plan ahead with these 3 easy steps outlined today, you're more than welcome to contact us in person or hop online on our website, New South Wales Trustee and Guardian website, and get all the information you needed. And of course, due to the current stay-at-home orders, in-person wills and estate planning appointments have been temporarily suspended. across New South Wales. However, you can call 1300 10 20 30 for alternative options, and that also includes booking appointments via audio visual. Thank you so much, and I apologise for the technical issues, and I'll hand this back to Karen. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was terrific. And don't worry about the technical issues. We all have these challenges from time to time. So thank you for that presentation, and thank you, Tina, for your presentation. That brings us towards the end of our time together today, and there has been some really good questions asked on the question function. What we'll do is ask those questions to Sharon and to Tina after this event today, and ask Sharon and Tina to put some responses in writing back to you. We'll also have the recording available after this session, so you can reflect back if there's things that you want to review as well. And also Tina and Sharon will share some links and some resources in those after session resources today. I listened to a presentation from Sharon some time ago, and I actually organised for my dad to go to the New South Wales Publican Trustee, and he had all of his documents completed. And because he was a full pensioner, he was able to do that without a cost. So it was fantastic. And I know we all feel much more comfortable now that he hasn't got his own personally drawn up will sitting in a box in the cupboard. So thank you for that. Okay, so Aging Well is a collaboration of Catholic Care Sydney, Catholic Healthcare, Grief Care, Australian Catholic Super, and New South Wales Public Trustee and Guardian. Our masterclass series are designed to help you navigate some of the hurdles around ageing and provide information on where you can get further support. I'll take this moment to remind you about next week's masterclass covering Catholic spirituality of ageing, exploring blessings and challenges for more faith-filled life. God's final call to a strong finish. This will be on at 10 a.m, Tuesday the 5th of October. Between now and then, you'll receive an email reminder of next week's masterclass with the Zoom login, plus a link to our Aging Well pages with the information from today's class and the link to the recording. Thank you, Tina and Sharon, for your presentation today, and I'd like to thank Luke Reynolds from Catholic Care Sydney and his team for providing the technical support. Again, thank you for joining us today. We hope you gained some valuable insights from our presentation, and looking at the lovely comments in the chats, I can see that many people really enjoyed today's session, so thank you for those comments. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.